Some stories are about huge battles or grand, sweeping military strategies. This one's different. It's smaller, way more personal. It's about a single promise, one that was made in a small Dutch village during the darkest days of World War II. And it's about how that same promise is being kept alive today by one man for one fallen soldier. This is that story.
And that brings us to Erwin Wilmink. These are his words. He has no direct family connection to the war, but his personal mission, this idea that war is, at its core, evil and brutal, well, that's the very heart of this story. It's his way of making sure we never, ever forget the human cost of conflict.
So, this is the big question, isn't it? Why on earth would a modern Dutch executive decide to adopt the grave of an American airman he never knew, who died decades before he was even born? The answer ties a quiet cemetery in the Netherlands all the way back to the war-torn skies of 1943, and it reveals this incredible story about memory and honor and what it means to take personal responsibility.
Okay, let's dive into our first section, a personal mission for peace. So on one hand, you have Erwin Wilmink. He's a financial director living in the Netherlands today. And on the other, separated by more than 80 years of history, is Staff Sergeant Harold Sparks. He was a 21-year-old waist gunner from California who signed up in 1942 and never made it home. Two totally different people from totally different worlds, and yet their lives are now connected by a single headstone.
See, for Erwin, this isn't about big public ceremonies or holidays. He actually told the Grave Adoption Committee that his mission was to visit on the quiet days, the random Tuesdays, the rainy afternoons when no one else is around. His real goal is to use his own network to gently remind people that behind every statistic of war, every number, there's a real person with a real story. And that story deserves to be told.
All right, let's go back in time. Section 2, the Man O' War's last flight. We're going to look at exactly what happened on July 30th, 1943.
So for the 10-man crew of the B-17 bomber called the Man O' War, this was it, their very first combat mission. They took off from England, flew all the way into Germany, and actually succeeded. They dropped their bombs on the Messerschmitt aircraft factories. But on the flight home, their luck just ran out. At around 11 in the morning, over the Netherlands, German fighters found them.
And we're not talking about a small plane here. The B-17 was nicknamed the Flying Fortress for a reason. It was a massive, 4-engine heavy bomber, just bristling with machine guns. But even with all that defensive firepower, the Man O' War was crippled by the German fighters. They got separated from their protective formation, and they were left on their own.
In the absolute chaos that happened next, only 2 of the 10 men on board would survive. The other 8 were killed. These were engineers, gunners, a navigator, guys from all over the United States. And get this. One of them, the engineer, Americo Cianfici, he had gotten married just 2 days before he died. Now we come to Section 3, the brutality and the grace. The brutality of it was just stark. And we know it happened because local villagers saw it with their own eyes. A Dutch farmer watched the crew bail out, only to see a German pilot actually circle back around and open fire on the men as they were helplessly dangling from their parachutes. "I got so mad," he said later. It was just a horrific, horrific act. But then, in the middle of that horror, you see this moment of grace. The local mayor, a man named Bart Vermege, he rushed to the crash site. He helped recover the bodies of the 8 fallen airmen, and he brought them to the local mortuary. And his wife's first instinct, her first thought, wasn't about hate or revenge. It was about compassion. She placed a large bouquet of white flowers among the fallen. And that single act of kindness led to something so much bigger. Section 4, a village's sacred promise. 8 graves. Now, normally, fallen American soldiers were later moved to large central military cemeteries. It was standard procedure. But the people of Oppinen, they made a special request. They asked that these 8 men be allowed to stay. They promised they would care for them. And man, did they keep that promise. In 1943, while still under German occupation, the entire village turned out for the burial. They defied the occupiers and just covered the graves in flowers. After the war, one of the airmen's families donated a beautiful triptych to the local church. Decades passed. In 1983, a memorial stone was unveiled, and then, in 2006, a whole new neighborhood was built, and they named 10 of the streets after the crew of the Man o' War.
So, why? Why does this particular memory live on so strongly? That brings us to our final section. Why this memory lives on. For Irwin, this isn't just about something that happened a long time ago. He looks at the world right now, and, in his words, he's pained by the constant warmongering. He says, I hear politicians shouting about more weapons, instead of how we are going to get peace. And he feels like it's his duty to push back against that. Not with politics, but with this simple, powerful act of remembrance.
So really, that's it. That's why he did it. By adopting this one grave, Irwin's making himself a part of that 80-year-old promise. He's the newest link in this long chain of remembrance, making absolutely sure that the story of Harold Sparks and the terrible price he paid doesn't just fade away into a name on a list. And it leaves you with this really powerful thought, doesn't it? A single grave, tended by a stranger, generations later. In a world where everything is so fleeting, what does it actually take to make sure a memory never dies? Well, the Village of Opining shows us that sometimes it takes a community, and sometimes it just takes one person making a quiet promise at a single grave.